think you can blame Donald Trump for really trafficking in bigotry and Islamophobia.
So the fact that Donald Trump is really an Islamophobe is something that a lot of his base applauds, and he doesn't want to.
If we talk about Islamophobia, the world's most prominent Islamophobe sits in the White House.
Well, you heard a lot of that in the wake of that horrific attack in Christchurch, New Zealand, on 2 mosques. And when we saw that they were targeted, well, Chelsea Clinton's getting now all this grief at a Friday night vigil. It's not just the president that's in their sights. Radicals on the left are using a horrific tragedy to turn the page on anti-Semitic tropes disseminated by some of the newest Democratic congresswomen. And this is perhaps best exemplified by activist Linda Sarsour, who tweeted, "I'm triggered by those who piled on Representative Ilhan Omar, now giving condolences to our community." Here now to put all of this in perspective are 2 scholars, 2 Muslim reformers in New York. Dr. Qanta Ahmed is a member of the Muslim Council of Foreign Relations, and here in Washington, Asra Nomani, a co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement. Asra, this deal with going after even Chelsea Clinton last week, what was that?
Well, it was right out of the toolbox of this network, this global network that wants to collect wounds in order to justify more demands on the West. We call them wound collectors because...
Wound collectors?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Don't you like, it was an FBI agent, Joe Navarro, who came up with this term. And there was a tragedy that happened in New Zealand. We all know
Horrific.
this. It was horrible. I wanted to go to the mosque on Friday, but I too felt afraid to go. And that should not happen. But what happened immediately? This network that includes Linda Sarsour, the Council on American Islamic Relations, they exploited this situation to push their agenda forward, to try to build more victimhood for Muslims and ultimately silence any criticism of Islamic extremism. So these last few days, I've been hearing a lot about we need to go after the supremacists, we need to go after the ideology. But for 10 years, we've been talking about trying to do that against Islamic extremists and the Muslim supremacists. And this network has shut us down.
So it's only one type of extremism.
Exactly.
So all of that extremism needs to be exposed for what it is. Dr. Ahmed, you were actually on CNN. Asra was talking about how people are silenced into submission. I want to play a clip of your appearance on CNN and what they did to you. Let's watch.
This president and this administration is often castigated as Islamophobic, but I move in the Muslim world, in Egypt, in Oman, in Jordan, in Iraqi Kurdistan, where this president is beloved. So it's very important not to lose so much perspective that we start believing our entire government is Islamophobic. That's not the case.
Well, they actually went immediately to break after that. Like, they didn't want any more of that conversation.
To be fair, Laura, Frederica had given me a number of minutes, and this was the final point. But this is a message nobody wants to hear. And I do say that. The president is beloved when I've met Egyptian soldiers in Giza, when I've been with the Peshmerga in Kurdistan, who were armed by the United States and greatly helped by President Trump. But there's something much more important going on, and that is the normalization of something called Islamophobia, which is portrayed as a lethal anti-Muslim bigotry. What we saw in New Zealand is lethal, appalling, repugnant anti-Muslim xenophobia. What Islamophobia is what silences women in Iran, what has imprisoned 200 Christians in Pakistan, what is holding a Muslim Fulbright scholar, Junaid Hafiz, in prison for 6 years in Pakistan. It's the fictional defamation of Islam. We are not having it here in the United States. It is completely un-Islamic to not be able to question Islam. Islam is absolutely robust and can stand up to scrutiny, but Islamists crumble under scrutiny, and that's what I'm opposed to. That means I am grieving for Muslims that have been executed by a white supremacist, just as I would when they're executed by a jihadist. But that does not mean we allow Islamophobia to control our speech in the United States. And worse, Linda Sarsour is taking credit for modulating the House Resolution 183 and equating Islamophobia to anti-Semitism, which is diabolical.
Yeah, well, but they're trying to represent you. They say Tlaib represents Muslim Americans, and like I say, I have a lot of Turkish friends. They're like, they don't represent me at all.
I thought
they do not represent my friends who are more reform-minded Muslims, women and men.
When I saw your graphic tonight of 2020 radicalization, I thought I was going to see the faces of these Muslim radicals that have taken over the Democratic Party, Linda Sarsour, the CARE representatives. I mean, they're trying to bring ISIS brides back to America. That doesn't represent us. That doesn't represent mainstream Muslims in America. What has happened now is the Democratic Party has been hijacked by radical Muslims, and this is something that has to stop.
And it's antithetical to egalitarianism, women's rights, the rights across the board. We have to do an entire hour on this topic because we're always up against a hard break. I want to hear more from Dr. Ahmed, and also on my podcast, I'm going to have you both appear on that. We can do a whole hour because this is such a big issue. And it's not being covered well. Yeah. And I can't do it justice in a short segment.
And we want to tell
would
people,
you both come back? Because we just have to do this. You're both fantastic.
We want to tell people, keep thinking. Don't stop.
And Dr. Ahmed, keep speaking out. We need you to keep speaking out. Thank you so much.
And Laura, as a broadcaster, do not drop this subject because the silence is what the Islamists see.
Don't worry. I will not. They'll have to take me out, but they're not going to. Don't worry. A social media giant.